So hello everyone, I'm Dario Mantegazza and I work with Alessandro Giusti and Luca Gambardella at IDSIA in Lugano. My research focus is applying deep learning to vision, and currently I'm doing it by studying anomaly detection in robotic application, and previously I did it by working on semantic segmentation of environmental point cloud. And today, I will talk about neophobic mobile robots that avoid potential hazards. And let's start by talking about the fact that many robotic applications today involve a robot operating autonomously in an unknown environment. And that environment may include hazards that could cause it to crash, get stuck, or generally fail the mission. And depending on these scenarios, we could have failures that could be more costly than abrupting the mission earlier or modifying the plan to reach the final objective. And usually standard hazards are accounted for at design phase of these systems because autonomous robot controls include functionality to detect hazards like obstacles from their sensing data. And additionally, recent works went beyond this and combined different sensing abilities and deep learning approaches to understand the environment. But we want to introduce a new trait into robotics that we call neophobia. We take this trait from human and animal behaviors, and neophobia is the avoidance of an object or an aspect of the environment just because it was never seen or experienced before by the individual. And we see and foresee neophobia applied in robotics. And we, for example, have a ground robot that while walking, a legged robot while walking on the ground detects something unusual over in front of it and detects something that is strange and decided to take a slightly longer path on familiar ground instead of walking through something that is odd. Or, for example, an example of a abrupted mission, we can imagine a planetary rover that immediately stopped the planet trajectory just because something is strange around it and decided to wait for the instruction from a ground control operator. So in the end, neophobia in robots, we can compare it to anomaly detection. And we will investigate how to provide robots with this capability of detecting generic unexpected hazards. In many realistic scenarios, an autonomous robot would benefit from this implementation because, as we said before, some type of path changing or plan changing would be far less costlier than going through the detected hazards and then maybe aborting the mission in a less favorable state. And so we want to introduce anomaly detection to robots because of this. But some would try to solve, for example, some type of hazard detection using standard supervised classification. And let's imagine that what is on the left side of the screen is actually the data that we have collected on our real world scenario, let's say. And we have normal situations that are in blue and green situations that are in, anomalous situations that are these green boxes. We could create a train set and a test set like this and train a model to classify this type of situation in a normal and anomalous one. But then at deployment, we would end up with something that is not expected because hazard, with the meaning that we give to the word hazard, is something that is unexpected. It's something that cannot be accounted for at design phase. So, for example, we would have a model that would identify these boxes as safe, this one as unsafe, and would be unsure of this one. In addition to this, for this example, we are assuming that we are able to capture a lot of anomalous situations, but real world data showed us that usually what you get is something like this, where you have a lot of normal situation and just one or two anomalous one. In this case, then we train a system that solves the anomaly detection problem, and we define a training set composed only of normal situation. We train a model that is able to detect only normal situation and not anomalous one. And then in real world, we deploy our model that produces an anomaly score that in general is something that how much the sample differs from the nominal training data. And it's a score that can go from 0, that means completely safe, to 1, that means completely anomalous. And for example, in this case, we can see that the blue boxes are identified as normal, while the other two are identified by, as anomalous. But what is an anomaly in general? Well, it depends on the context. For example, on the left side, we have a temperature sensor that detects a certain range of temperature, and then we have a spike. That spike is out of the context of these sensors, so we detect it as an anomaly. Or in this case, a more funny example, but here we are looking for Jaguar cars, and then our research gives us an animal. That would be out of context, and this could be an anomaly. But what are anomalies for robot? Well, anomalies for robot starts from a simple object that obstruct the plan to a more complex concepts. For example, we have a simple puddle of water that could be either something small that the robot could pass, but for example, for a ground robot, if not accounted for, that water could interact with the systems and create defects. We could have debris that could puncture the wheeled robot wheels. Or we could also detect another type of anomaly that is less about the external environment, but more about the internal state of the robot. We could have defects like, for example, a wrongly working turret, or for example, another type of defect that we could detect is either a broken lens or something that is ruining the lens. And for example, let's imagine that we have a robot that needs to see in front of it to plan autonomously, then something like this would be pretty impairing. And then we have two examples that are coming from one of our scenario. In this case, we are working with an industrial partner that is called Overing Solution. And they gave us a simulation of the situation that they expect their drone to be in. And in this top side here, we see a tunnel that has a water condensation on the ceiling. And they experienced in their earlier life missions that sometimes some tunnel that they have to explore would have a lot of condensation of water. And then whenever the drone would move air under those water condensation, the water would simply rain over the drone, damage it irreparably. And then we have another example of even a more strange type of hazard that is dust. We never expect dust to be a type of hazard, but for some type of drones in some particular scenarios like this one, if dust is too much, it reaches a certain point that it damages the propellers and then fail the mission or destroy the drone. The first use case, as I have anticipated before, is a drone flying inside of a tunnel, man-made tunnel. The drone is flying autonomously, and we expect that the drone is empty. So in order to avoid any type of problems, but in case something like dangling root or water droplets come down from the ceiling, we want to have a system, an AI-based system, that to detect those hazards in order to enact some policy to avoid those hazards. And the second use case that we have is a similar one, but now it's a ground robot, a RoboMaster. And in this case, we are traveling inside the new campus corridors, and we expect them to be empty and clean. And we want to be able to detect any type of hazard. Could be a small water puddle and could be debris or an open door or human beings coming towards the robot. And we want to be able to detect those hazards and employ the correct policy to avoid them. The tool that we use for anomaly detection on robot is an autoencoder. That is a type of neural network. In our case, it's based on convolutional layers. The autoencoder works by reproducing the input they receive. And they do so by learning how to encode the information that they receive in the encoder section, and then learn how to decode that information. We reduce the amount of information that passes from the encoder to the decoder in the bottleneck, and we will see a bit later how this bottleneck works. And an important fact about autoencoders is that if the input differs from what it was learned during training, the autoencoder will produce an output that is not similar to the input, but similar to something that it has seen during training. And we can exploit this error in reproduction, producing error maps that can be used for the task of anomaly detection. In this case, during the lockdown, I recorded some minutes of this RoboMaster driving inside of a corridor in my house, and we expected as a normal situation of this corridor to be empty. And as you can see, the autoencoder was able to reproduce the corridor details pretty good and good enough to have a low error map. But as soon as we added some obstacle like a cat or some bottles, then we can see that the autoencoder is not capable of reproducing these objects. And actually, we can highlight the anomalies in our error map by doing a simple difference between these two images. So we are working with 3 data sets, overing solution sim, that is a simulated drone exploration of human-made underground tunnel. Then our partner were able to get their hands on a testing facility, and they managed to do some flights in a testing facility. So we have also overing solution real, that is a real drone exploration of a testing facility. And then we have our own indoor RoboMaster subsea, a RoboMaster that is exploring the subsea campus Est corridor. And we are in the process of releasing this dataset with our next publication. And here I just put that overing solution is our industrial partner with this one, with the OneSwarm project. Now I will talk about a bit the datasets, and I'll go into details on how we do the recordings and how they are built. So in this case, we recorded a lot of frames from different simulation in Blender, and we built. They actually, overing solution built the simulation with empty tunnels for normal data and some anomalous stuff for the anomalous data. The anomalies that they built in were roots. I don't know if you can see this, but actually here we have a root. And this is also already an example on how much it is difficult to see this type of anomalies. Then we have wet ceilings of the tunnel that could represent a possible rain. And then we have dust collecting in the air moved by the drone. Since this was a simulated drone, we were able to record a lot of frames. We have a large training set and a large test set. And we have only 3 anomalies, but they have a lot of frames that are available for testing. Then we move to the overing solution real. Here we have a real drone that records real data, but simulates a mission. This is the testing facility that they use for this dataset recording. And in this case, we have a drone that goes from this section towards the other section, back and forth. And the normal data is, again, an empty corridor, let's say, with no anomalies and a drone easily flying through it. And then in this case, they were able to add 2 types of anomalies. One, global anomalies, or a large one, like mists. They used dry ice to produce this mist, and the drone would fly through it. And then they put some tape over some pillars, and the drone would fly under that tape, and that tape would act as a local anomaly. In this case, since it was a real data, they managed only to record 5,000 frames that we could use for the training set, and 6,000 frames that we could use for the test set. And here you're actually seeing something that looked like more reality, because in the simulated drone, dataset, sorry, we were able to record a lot of anomalous data. In this case, we only have 500 frames, for example, for the tape anomaly. And it's a lot less than 5,000, and even more than what we were able to record with the overing solution simulated dataset. And then we move to the sorry, this is an error, but this is the subsea RoboMaster dataset. In this case, we have a RoboMaster that is traveling inside these corridors at subsea. As I said before, we expect a normal empty tunnel whenever we have a nominal situation, and that's what is used for training the autoencoder. And then we place different type of anomalies. In this case, we added a lot of anomalies because we want to create a new data set for for a benchmark for this type of applications. And in this case, we have 25,000 frame for the training set and a similar number for the test set. And we have a higher number of anomalies with a higher number of frames. But in this case, the number of frames are considering also nominal situation where we are approaching the anomaly, but the anomaly is still to be seen. So the actual frames with the anomaly well inside are even less than this. So to recap, we for anomaly detection, we expect to have a robot, for example, here a drone that flies in a nominal situation and record a data set composed only of nominal situations. Then we train a model on this normal data, and then we are able to test it and deploy it in real world thanks to the approach that we use. About our metrics, we compute two types of reconstruction error for each frame. We compute the mean absolute error and mean squared error. And if a data set like the one in our case have more than one label, then for each label, we compute 4 different AUC, the precision recall and the ROC AUC for each reconstruction error. And then we build also 4 additional general AUC where we treat all anomalies as one. Because in general, we cannot expect any type of anomaly in the real world. So it would be meaningless to simply build metrics on the type of anomaly that we can expect because are in our test set. So we build a general AUC that treat all anomalies as one and would reflect more the performance in the real world. And finally, we decided to focus on the mean absolute error as the main metric for finding anomalies, even though we still record all of the others. But this problem is not as easy as it sounds, because anomaly detection in real scenario is difficult, as anomalies can be ambiguous. Here we have 3 examples of ambiguity. On the left side, we have a tunnel that we've recorded as it would be a normal situation, but later on we discovered that there was a plank on the background here. I guess that you can see it. And we are not sure if this plank would be detected as an anomaly or not in a testing phase. And instead here we have 2 anomalous situations, but that looks like more a normal situation. Here we are far away from these 2 type of anomalies that are actually 2 different type of anomalies. Here we have a different flooring, and here we have debris. But from this distance, we are not sure if this frame is anomalous or not. Usually we do some type of manual labeling of the testing set, and this situation already are ambiguous, even for us humans. The detection of anomaly could be related to the speed of the robot, or could be related to other factors. So in general, this task is not as easy as it sounds because of these ambiguities. But how do we discriminate anomalies? And now I will go back to the concept of bottleneck that I started to explain before. So the bottleneck is an essential part of the autoencoder because it's a fully connected layer that sits in the middle between the encoder and the decoder. The idea of the bottleneck, and in this case, we are using simple autoencoders, not variational one. The idea of the bottleneck is to, first of all, eliminate the spatial information that can be passed through convolutional layers. And second of all, is the second and most important aspect of the bottleneck is to reduce the amount of information that is passed between the encoder and the decoder. Because an infinitely sized bottleneck theoretically is able to perfectly reproduce the image that it has received in input. And that would be ideal, for example, for nominal situation, because we know that those are nominal and we don't want to detect any errors in those. But then such an autoencoder would be able to reproduce perfectly also anomalous situation or even something that it has never seen. And we actually tested it briefly in one of our first experiment. We wrongly set the bottleneck size to a large number, and we were astonished by the fact that that autoencoder was able to reproduce almost everything that we passed through it. Then we have to do something else. We have to induce a reproduction error, and we do so by reducing the bottleneck size to a smaller number of neurons. And this will induce a reproduction error also in a normal situation. But that's okay, and we expect that. And for example, here we have a very small autoencoder that is producing an error map that is pretty high even for a nominal situation, but would be higher for anomalous situation. So the idea is that if we induce a reproduction error in our autoencoder output, we can expect that that reproduction error is higher for anomaly than it is for normal situation. So we tested different bottleneck sizes, and we tracked the error in reproduction of different variables. We can see, following the orange line and the red line, that our normal data has a lower reproduction error than the average anomaly one. And this delta increases whenever we stay in this area, in this section of the plot, where we have bottleneck sizes that are pretty small. And then whenever we go further down, whenever we increase the bottleneck size, we are actually seeing that this delta kind of plateaus, because then other factors of the autoencoder architecture get into play. And if we plot the anomaly distribution error, the reproduction error for each frame of our data split from anomaly and normal data, we actually see this delta in work, because here we have a bottleneck of only one neuron, and this information is too little even for an autoencoder to reproduce normal or anomalous data correctly. So we have a lot of error for both of the distribution. But then as soon as we pass a correctly sized as soon as we set a correctly sized bottleneck, we can see that the amount of information for the normal data is enough to reproduce them with a low error, and we get this nice green distribution here. While for the anomalous data, except from some ambiguity that we have here, we can see that in general the distribution has a long tail towards the right side of the plot, and has a more densely section here. And so we can simply set a threshold to detect anomalies using the reproduction error. But what if we go even further down on a larger size, then we can see that the information that is passing through the bottleneck is too much, and the even anomalous situation starts to be reproduced better than before. So it's more difficult to determine a threshold here to distinguish between anomalous and normal situations. So we expect that in this case, bottlenecks that is correctly sized would produce a higher AUC, and in fact, that's what we achieved. Here we have a plot where we have the AUC over the mean absolute error. And as you can see, we reach our peak whenever we set a bottleneck size that is small enough, large enough to pass enough information for the normal data, but small enough to avoid too many too much information to pass towards the decoder. And with this information, we were able to test for different demos. The first one was during the lockdown. In this case, we throw a pillow in front of a RoboMaster. And again, this model was trained only on an empty corridor. I'm piloting manually the RoboMaster, and I'm setting it to go forward. But as soon as the anomaly is detected, a switch is flicked, and also the red lights goes red, but we cannot control the robot anymore. It gets stuck where it is until the anomaly is taken away. In the second, third, and fourth demo, we are actually flying a drone inside the testing facility. In this case, the anomaly detector runs on board over the drone, and the drone is manually piloted. So in case of an hazard, it will go through the hazard. And but in this video here, the drone is not detecting any hazard. I will pause a minute here just to explain what we are seeing. We are actually seeing the image coming from the drone, the reproduction, the output of the autoencoder, and the difference of what is seen. Down below, we have a line that is now all green, and that would mean that every frame that is seen, the past 30 frames are all green. Sorry, past 300 frames are all okay. And below, we see a plot of the anomaly score and a filtered anomaly score over time of what has been seen. And in this case, we don't see any type of anomaly, so everything is green, everything is below a certain threshold, and we're okay with that. But if we fly the drone, again, here is piloted manually, so it will go through the hazard. But if we fly the drone towards an anomaly, in this case mist, that is made with dry ice, the drone, the autoencoder will have some problem reproducing the image, and we will have a spike in the anomaly detection, and those frames would be labeled as anomalous. So in another situation, we could enact a policy to avoid this type of hazard. And in fact, that's what we did with a demo where the anomaly detector was running off board while the drone flied autonomously. And in this case, the anomaly is the tape that was hanging between two pillars. And whenever the drone detects enough information to determine that there is an anomaly in front, it starts to enact the policy to avoid the hazard, that in this case is to backtrack. And in this example, we also see that there is a following drone that follow the behavior of the sentinel drone in this case. Okay. But small hazards are also problematic because we don't only have ambiguities whenever we see an hazard that is far away, but we also have problems with the hazards that are pretty small. Because our encoder, in order to run on board on some drones and in order to be efficient, it has to receive images that are smaller. For example, we pass frames that are 64 by 64 pixels. And but by doing this resolution reduction, we also cancel out some information. And for example, you can imagine that these dust particles would be blended into the background or simply canceled out by the resolution reduction, and we would lose some information. So in general, small hazards are problematic because they are not covering the whole scenery like this tape, because even if they are not deleted by the resolution reduction, they could be difficult to be detected because they could only be some set of pixels in the middle of the image, but not covering the whole image as the mist anomaly did. So we are doing a multi-scale approach. We're extending the approach that we have used using patches. And we are in a process of submitting a paper to this topic to RAL. And currently our approach takes, as I said before, a single image and determine if that frame is anomalous or not. Our future approach will take different patches and determine if each patch, determine the anomaly error of each, anomaly score, sorry, of each patch, and then use an ensembled an ensemble of these errors to determine if the original frame is anomalous or not. In this case, we are able to use a larger frame. And
Dario, maybe you can bring us to conclusion.
Yeah, that's actually the last slide, because we are still in the work for the results, and I'm open for questions. Thanks.
Great.